Hey everyone, welcome back. Alright, for this next story, we're heading back to Hong Kong. This one comes from a young guy. We'll call him Brian. At the time, Brian was an office worker. His main responsibilities were pretty straightforward: filing paperwork, helping out the team, and scanning a lot of documents for clients. The office scanner, it was practically his best friend, or his worst enemy, depending on how you look at it. Because scanning was such a big part of his daily workload, it started getting annoying having to constantly walk back and forth between his desk and the shared office scanner. It wasn't close by either. The scanner was tucked away in some random corner of the office, and after a while, it just became a hassle. So Brian figured, why not just get his own? One of those small personal desktop scanners. Nothing fancy, just something that could sit on his desk so he could scan everything straight to PDF. Smart move, right? At first, Brian thought he would just buy a brand new scanner, but once he looked up the price, yeah, no way. Way too expensive for something he will only be using at work. So instead, he went browsing on a local secondhand site, kind of like Facebook Marketplace. And sure enough, he found a listing pretty quickly. A desktop scanner, older model, but it had all the features he needed. He didn't really need anything too fancy, just something that worked. And best of all, it was going to be like a quarter of the price of that brand new one he was originally looking at. Seemed like a great idea at the time. Brian messaged the seller, and they arranged to meet that weekend at a nearby MTR station for the exchange. The seller turned out to be an older man, probably in his late 70s. Brian was honestly a bit surprised someone his age even knew how to post on that kind of website, but the guy seemed trustworthy enough. The scanner was wrapped up tight. Layers of plastic bags and newspapers, all tied up with a red string. Brian could sort of see inside, and yeah, it looked like the right model. It was super cheap compared to the retail price, so Brian figured, whatever. Not worth trying to rip it all open in the middle of a crowded MTR station just to double check the product. Even if it didn't work, it would just be a small loss. So he handed the old man the cash. They said their goodbyes and they went their separate ways. Since Brian was already near the office after the meetup, Brian figured, why not just drop it off and get the scanner set up now? That way, everything would be ready to go first thing Monday morning. In the office, he made his way over to his desk and started unwrapping the scanner. It was really wrapped up. Like multiple layers of blue plastic bags and newspapers. It took a good few minutes to get it totally unwrapped. When he finally pulled it free, he could tell right away, yeah, this thing's been through a lot. The surface was pretty scratched up. There were dings and little cracks here and there. It definitely looked like it had seen better days. No wonder it was so cheap, Brian thought. Still, as long as it worked, he didn't care. It was just for work anyway. He plugged it in, and surprisingly, it turned on without any issues. The screen lit up and displayed the total page count of the past scans in its lifetime. It was well over 1,000 scans. Clearly, this thing had been used a lot. One of the main reasons Brian picked up the scanner was because it had a feature he really needed: double-sided scanning. That meant no more having to scan one side, flip it over, and then scan again. It was a huge time saver for him. So, for most of the week, Brian used the new scanner for all of his client files. It actually worked pretty smoothly. But then, midway through the week, as Brian was working late alone in the office one night, he got a call from one of his clients. The guy sounded a little confused and asked, "Hey, why was that latest invoice you sent look like the original was done on carbon paper?" Brian blinked. Carbon paper? What do you mean? For each invoice, the client receives 2 PDFs, the front and the back. The back is usually just a blank page from the double-sided scanning option, but it wasn't totally blank. There was some kind of small imprint on it. Thing is, Brian never used carbon paper. None of the invoices were on that kind of paper. Everything he sent had been typed out and then signed on regular paper before they're scanned into a PDF and emailed out. Brian went back to his sent emails to double check, and sure enough, the client wasn't wrong. Every single invoice he had sent that week, the second page, which should have been blank, had some kind of faint imprint on it. It was hard to make out, almost like an imprint from some other document that had been left behind. It looked like some kind of newspaper headline maybe. He couldn't quite tell. It was fuzzy, grainy, and just barely visible. Almost like a shadow burned into the paper. So Brian stared at the scanner on his desk. He remembered that the software automatically created a new folder each day it was used, which helped keep things organized. Since he had used it for 3 days so far, there were 3 folders on his computer, with a history of everything that was scanned along with timestamps of when each document was scanned. He clicked into them and noticed something weird. There were the files that he scanned during the day, during the work hours, but then there were a bunch of other scans that were done way after he left the office. Scans at 2 or 3 in the morning. There's no way anyone else could have been in the office at that time. Even if there was, he was the only one that does the scanning. As Brian was opening them up on the screen, he could tell they were all duplicates of the same sheet as what the client saw. It was pretty much a blank page with something imprinted on it, but it wasn't legible. It looked like what you would normally see in large bold letters on a newspaper headline. Then the scanner suddenly lit up and started scanning by itself. Brian froze. What the hell? He hadn't touched anything. No paper had been inserted to be scanned. Nothing was queued. It was just starting to scan on its own. Did I get hacked or something? He wondered. When the scanner finally stopped humming, Brian looked back at his computer screen. 3 new files had appeared in the scan history folder for today, all with a fresh timestamp. Brian hovered his mouse over the first file. He hesitated. Something about this felt off. His gut was telling him not to open them, but he had to find out what these were. He double-clicked. These folders weren't like the weird fuzzy imprints from before. No, these scans were crystal clear. The first file opened an image of a woman. She looked like she was in her early 40s. The photo was square, perfectly framed, almost like a passport photo. But Brian didn't recognize her. He stared at it for a few seconds, trying to make sense of it. That's when the uneasiness started to crawl in. It was around 11 p.m. now. The office was dead quiet. Everyone had gone home hours ago, and the only light was the soft yellow glow of the desk lamp beside him. The rest of the floor was pitch black, and he was completely alone. He glanced around just to be sure. But no, nobody was there. No one had walked in. And besides, it wasn't like someone could have snuck a photo into the scanner with him there. As scared as he was, Brian forced himself to click on the second file. It was another photo of the same woman. Same square frame, same face. But this time, the image was zoomed out slightly. That's when Brian realized this wasn't a passport photo. It was a headstone photo. Her picture was mounted on a gravestone, like the kind used in cemeteries to mark the graves. Brian's heart sank. He stared at the screen, frozen. This couldn't be real. Who was she? And why was this scanner, a random secondhand scanner, spitting out images of a deceased woman? He wanted to leave right then and there, but he couldn't resist opening the third and final file. He clicked on it. It was a scan of a newspaper clipping. A bold headline ran across the top in blocky black letters. Woman ends her life by jumping off an apartment building due to work-related stress. Brian felt the blood drain from his face. Something about the scanner wasn't normal, and whatever it was, he wanted no part of it. He started packing up his things in a panic, ready to leave as fast as he could. But just as he zipped up his bag, he heard it. A soft laugh coming from somewhere behind him. He froze. Slowly, he turned toward the hallway, toward the office entrance. And there, standing in a dark hallway, halfway hiding behind the doorframe, there she was, the woman from the photos. She was just standing there, smiling, and looking like she was having a great time. Brian's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. He backed up instinctively, pressing himself against his desk, heart pounding in his ears. In his panic, his leg caught the scanner's power cord, and he tripped. He fell hard onto the floor, pulling the scanner down with him. The scanner slammed against the tiles with a large bang. Brian scrambled to his feet as fast as he could, eyes darting around the room. But the doorway was now empty. Shaking, he grabbed his backpack, ripped the scanner's plug from the socket, and bolted out of the office with the scanner in hand. He didn't wait for the elevator, he just ran straight down the stairs, 2 steps at a time. At the bottom, near a pile of garbage outside the building, he chucked the scanner into a dark corner and ran. He didn't stop until he was home. That night was the scariest thing Brian had ever experienced in his life. But strangely, after he tossed that scanner away, nothing else happened. The next day, when he returned to the office, he mustered the courage to check the folders again, But those 3 images that he saw that night before, they were nowhere to be found. The only files left were the ones with the strange, unreadable imprints. But the photos, they were totally gone, like they were never there to begin with. So, what do you think actually happened to Brian that night? Was he just exhausted from working so late that his mind started playing tricks on him? Or was that scanner he picked up secondhand actually haunted? Could it have belonged to the woman in the photo? Maybe it was something deeply tied to her job, something she couldn't let go of, even after death. And what about that old man who sold it to Brian? Did he know what he was passing on? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Alright, for our second story, we're heading back to Japan. The story is centered around something so ordinary that most of us barely give it a second thought, until we're taking it alone at night. I'm talking about elevators. Back when Haru was still in middle school, his best friend Kenzo lived about a 20-minute walk from his house. Haru was over there all the time, at least 2 or 3 times a week. They did what most of us did back then, played video games, flipped through manga, and just watched random stuff on TV. It was just easy, regular kid stuff. Until one night changed everything. Haru went over so often that both families knew each other pretty well. At this point, all he had to do was tell his mom, "Hey, I'm going to Kenzo's." And that would be it, no questions asked. It was routine. Kenzo was the kind of kid that parents liked. He got good grades, he was polite, respectful, so Haru's mom never worried about him. But on this particular night, he stayed later than usual. Normally Haru would head home by 7, the latest. But tonight, it was already past 9 p.m. As Haru got ready to leave, Kenzo's dad asked if he wanted a ride home. It sounded nice, especially since Kenzo's family had a car. But Haru, not wanting to be a bother, just smiled and said, "No, it's okay, my mom's coming to get me." Which wasn't exactly true. It was just a little white lie. His mom definitely wasn't coming all the way just to get him. He planned to walk, as always. So Kenzo lived on the 4th floor of a typical Japanese apartment building. The kind with the narrow hallways and soft buzzing lights overhead. To leave, Haru had to take the elevator down to the ground floor, marked simply L for lobby. Below that, there were 2 more floors, B1 and B2. Both of them were underground parking garages. Haru knew this pretty well because Kenzo's dad would sometimes take them out on weekend trips, to arcades, ramen spots, or just cruising around, and they would all head down together to grab the car. So he had been down there before, and was pretty familiar with the layout. Haru said his goodbyes and stepped out into the hallway. He walked over to the elevator, pressed the button, and waited for the old doors to slide open with a soft groan. He stepped inside, hit the button for L, and leaned back, ready to head home. The elevator started moving, humming softly, as it began its usual descent. But then, it jerked to a stop, right between the 4th and the 3rd floors. Just for a few seconds, not long, but long enough to feel weird. It's never happened before. Then, just as suddenly, it resumed like nothing happened. As the elevator reached the 1st floor, Haru stepped closer to the doors, expecting it to stop at the lobby L any second now. But it didn't. Instead of slowing down at L, the elevator kept going, straight down to B1. Haru blinked. That's weird, he thought. Elevators usually stop at your floor first, since you're already inside. The doors slid open at B1, but there was no one there. He poked his head out, looked around. Just rows of parked cars, and that cold underground stillness. Not a soul in sight. Haru quickly hit the closed door button and pressed L again, but the elevator didn't listen. Instead, it continued downward again to B2. Even at this point, Haru wasn't scared. Not yet. He just figured the elevator was acting up, probably needed some maintenance or something. B2 is the lowest floor, he reasoned, so the next stop has to be up. The doors slid open at B2. Again, no one was waiting. But this time, Haru did see a couple of cars driving around the lot, so everything still felt pretty normal. He hit the closed door button again and tapped L multiple times, as if clicking it more than once would make it go faster. But then, nothing. The elevator just sat there. The B2 button was blinking on and off, like it was stuck. The elevator didn't move. Seconds passed. Haru stood there watching that button flash, waiting for the familiar hum of the lift to start going upward. Finally, it started moving again, but something felt off. Instead of the usual feeling you get when the elevator goes up, this one felt like it was still descending. Now, Haru was starting to freak out a little. The elevator kept descending, just a few more seconds, but it felt like forever. Then, it stopped. Haru looked up on the little screen above the doors. It was frozen on displaying B2, and then the doors started to open. This floor, wherever they were, was dark, almost pitch black. Nothing like the other levels. Haru was too scared to look outside. He just kept jabbing the closed door button over and over, but the elevator didn't respond. Heart pounding, Haru told himself, "Okay, just figure out where you are. Maybe it will help." He leaned forward and poked his head out, just enough to take a peek. This was a floor he's never seen before. Usually, on every other floor in the building, there were always glowing green emergency exit signs, and stairwells on both sides of the elevator. Not here. This place had no doors, no stairwells, or signs, just a long, narrow hallway stretching into the darkness. And silence. Dead silence. No lights on the ceiling, no buzz from the overhead bulbs. The only thing Haru could make out was a faint glow. At the very end of the hallway, a soft purplish light, almost like the glow from a blacklight. Other than that, the only other source of light was coming from the elevator itself. After seeing that strange empty hallway, Haru panicked. He yanked his head back into the elevator and slammed the closed door button over and over again, more frantic with each press. But nothing happened. And then, out of nowhere, an arm reached in from the darkness outside to hold the elevator doors open. Haru's heart nearly stopped. There wasn't anyone out there just a few seconds ago. In stepped a man wearing a yukata and a woman wearing a traditional kimono. They both were expressionless. Neither of them looked at Haru or even acknowledged him at all. They looked to be in their 40s. Neither of them spoke. They just looked straight ahead. They walked in slowly and stood right in the middle of the elevator, right next to Haru. Haru gave them a polite bow, but they didn't react at all. They didn't press any buttons either, but somehow the elevator started moving again. The doors closed on their own, and Haru could feel it rising now. The screen above still didn't update. It was still stuck on B2, but it definitely felt like they were moving up now. After what felt like a single floor, the elevator stopped. The doors opened again, but it wasn't B2. It was another floor with a dark hallway, just like before. The layout was exactly the same as the prior floor. No signs, lights, or doors. Only that faint purplish light at the end of the hallway. The man and the woman stepped out without looking at Haru, and they just started walking forward, slowly into the darkness. Curious now, and still rattled, Haru stepped 1 foot out of the elevator just to get a better look to see where these two were going. The man kept walking, disappearing deeper into the shadows of the hallway, but the woman seemed to notice. She stopped in her tracks, and slowly she turned around. Haru froze. Even though the hallway was dark, she was still close enough to be lit by the elevator's glow. He could see her clearly. She was quite beautiful. She locked eyes with him, no emotion on her face, just a still, almost mournful stare. Then, without saying a word, she raised one hand, motioning him to stop, not to take another step. Then she shook her head slowly. Then with that same hand, she motioned for him to step back inside the elevator. It seemed like a silent warning not to follow them wherever they needed to go. Then, without warning, the elevator doors began to close. Haru panicked and slipped back inside, just in time. As the doors were closing, Haru could now see that the lady had continued her walk forward now that Haru was safely back on the elevator. He hit L again. This time, it worked. The floor display flickered, then shifted from B2 to B1, then finally, L. The doors opened, and he was back in the normal lobby, brightly lit and familiar. People were just walking around the lobby. A couple of neighbors smiled as they entered the elevator, just as Haru was stepping off. It was like nothing had happened. Still shaken, Haru went over to the security guard at the front desk and asked a simple question. "Hey, B2's the lowest floor in this building, right?" The guard nodded. Yeah, that's it. Just B1 and B2 down there. Haru didn't push it. He was just a middle schooler at the time, and he didn't want to sound crazy. So he didn't ask further questions. But now, looking back, he wishes he had asked to see the security footage, just to know what the cameras picked up while he was inside that elevator. After that night, Haru kept visiting Kenzo as usual, but whenever he stayed late, he took the stairs, just in case. So what do you think happened to Haru that night? Did he somehow step into another dimension? Somewhere where he wasn't supposed to be? And what if that woman hadn't warned him? Where do you think he would have ended up? And maybe the biggest mystery of all, who were those people? If you have any idea, or heard of something similar, please let us know in the comments below and share with the rest of us.